Being according as resumed, we're ready to go.
Ready to go.
Yes.
Thank you. I will now call the regular meeting of the Louisville Metro Air Pollution Control Board to order. We are conducting the monthly meeting today via video telecom. First agenda item is a call to recognize form. So when I call your name, please stand here. Jesse Comer. Here. Josephine Mag. No. Candace Shrub White. She may be on mute.
No, she was just very quiet.
Good enough.
You guys, I'm sorry.
Okay. Marissa Neal,
Here.
Charlie Bell,
Here.
Sajad Jamil. So we do have a quorum. Ms. Huntington, any introductions this way?
Yes. Good morning, Chairman Sullivan and board members. This morning, I'm especially pleased to introduce you to Dr. Lita Sessler Maloney. Dr. Sessler Maloney earned dual undergraduate degrees in science and chemistry from the University, and a doctor of environmental chemistry from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, with her research on pollution and fine particulate speciation during winter. She joins our air monitoring quality assurance section as a quality assurance coordinator. Step forward just a little bit. Oh. Come on up. Actually, how about the whole part of it? Yes. Maybe I'll just.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
Well, welcome.
Me too. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for joining.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. So from Alaska to Louisville.
Yes, well, Louisville to Alaska. Back to Louisville.
Okay, great. Well, welcome home.
No, I grew up in Germantown. Yeah. Super.
Well, welcome. That's it?
That's it for the introduction.
Next is public recognition.
Thank you again, Chairman Sullivan. This morning, I would like to recognize Mike Brown. Mike is an engineer too in our industrial compliance section. He has completed 30 years of really dedicated service to Metro government, 27 of those improving.
Thank you very much.
He did ask for a commemorative sundial. It ain't coming.
Very nice.
That
Thanks
is,
for your service.
no,
And keep on, right?
Actually, I am. I still have house payments.
Well, congratulations. The meeting of the regular meeting, the minutes of the meeting of the regular meeting held on January 17, 2024 were distributed electronically. Any changes to the minutes by the board? Hearing none, those are adopted. Public comment. Ms. King, is anybody registered to make a public comment this morning?
No, sir.
Ms. King, has anybody provided written comments this morning?
We received none.
Are there any members of the public in the Esmer that wish to make a comment? See none. Are there any members of the public that wish to make a brief comment on this video teleconference? Please raise your hand via video teleconference. You'll be called on. This is a feature you can find on the participants list or by pressing *3 if joining by phone, and you will be called upon. Ms. King?
I see no hands raised.
Thank you. This concludes the public comment portion of the meeting. There is no unfinished business. Likewise, there is no new business. Committees have not met since the last meeting. This is to the staff reports. President Hamilton, you're up.
thank you again. So this morning, I'm happy to let folks know we are in the process of interviewing for a new industrial permitting supervisor. We will fill the position led by Eva Addison. She retired back in December. We're also advertising for a new EPCD regulatory coordinator. But having started in that role at the district, it's one of the most interesting that we have. We hope to see a lot of well-qualified applicants when the position closes tomorrow. So if you know of anyone who would enjoy the type of work that we do, and we're going to talk a little bit about that more in detail, please encourage them to go to the Metro job site today and apply to that position. I think I've been teasing this now for the better part of 6 months, but on February 7th, US EPA announced a new national ambient air quality standard, particulate matter. Current standard is 12 micrograms per cubic meter, and that has now been strengthened to 9 micrograms per cubic meter. EPA estimates that the new standard will have net benefits of 22 to 46 billion by improving comfort lanes and people, by reducing exposure and mortality risk from fine particulate pollution, particularly in overburden areas. Nationally, these health benefits are estimated to include 4,500 avoided premature deaths, 800,000 avoided cases of asthma symptoms, and 290,000 avoided lost workdays. Based on EPA's projections, they estimate that 99% of the country will meet the new standard by the attainment date of 2032. That includes our own area. This is due in large part to ongoing reductions from federal rules and programs for our larger sources. That includes power plants, motor vehicles, and other sectors. The new standard is not yet effective. It will become effective 60 days after it's published in the Federal Register. Based on when those publications take place, we expect to see this rule finalized sometime in late April or early May. And that's important because timelines will start to flow from that date.
Rachel, can you speak up? I don't think our audio is real strong.
Thank you. One of the first things that will happen when it's final is that the new standard will be incorporated into the new source review, prevention of significant deterioration program, and it will apply to projects starting then that are subject to that rule. These are really the largest of our large projects. We haven't seen many PSD projects here in Louisville in a while, but again, they're intended to protect air quality, and they'll start as soon as this rule is final.
Does that mean that permits get modified or what happens to those things?
Yeah, so that's the new source review program. So it applies to new facilities and modified facilities, but they have to be pretty significant changes. So those significant levels are different for each pollutant in some cases and were set many years ago. We don't see many projects that reach that level, but it's possible. The last one we saw was Ford Motor Company at their truck plant about a decade ago. And that was the first in about 15 years.
Okay.
That program will immediately take into account that lower standard and require companies to apply best available control technology in order to help maintain that standard. That's one of the first things that happens. The next is that the air quality index, or the AQI, will be updated to reflect the strengthened standard. And given that change, it means that we're likely to see more air quality alert days initially as this new standard comes into play. 2 years after the standard is finalized, area attainment designations will take place with state implementation plan development work taking place thereafter. And that's in order for an area to demonstrate attainment by that 2032 deadline. In the meantime, I'm sure you can imagine, we're having lots of meetings with EPA and our state and local counterparts to work together for the planning of the implementation of this new standard. And that includes some new air monitoring provisions and also discussions around exceptional events. Not just our area, but across the country, we've seen an impact from those Canadian wildfires. Given our upcoming designations, that impact is now regulatorily. And we will be looking at the contribution here and determining whether we'll do an exceptional event demonstration for particulate matter in addition to ozone. We will be providing the board with more details as we move through this process. I have to tell everyone we've waited for this a really long time, and the implementation of it, it's going to be another kind of really long wait. When we talk about changing a national ambient air quality standard, we are essentially changing the economic ocean liner of the United States. And as we all know, turning an ocean liner takes time. So we'll continue to see pollution reductions while we also see robust economic development.
Have exceptions been granted for wildfires in the past?
Absolutely,
Recent past, they have.
they have.
For particular.
For particulate matter, we see this particularly out west, where they've had some pretty extensive fires in the past. For areas like ours, these Canadian wildfires are kind of a new event. To some extent, US EPA is developing tools to make the process easier. Those tools won't be ready for us at this point, which is a little disappointing. And it's somewhat disappointing that we'll need to do this work as an agency. We're looking with partners to see if it's possible to do a regional demonstration or even with others to do something on a wider geographic basis to try to share the load. They're not easy or quick undertakings. Any other questions on that?
Is there any projections on what they anticipate for this season's wildfire?
No,
Just based on weather patterns, if nothing else?
not that I've heard, although we can take a look for that because as I learned last year, there is a Canadian wildfire season. It starts with our own ozone season. So we could probably look to see what the Canadian government is forecasting for their wildfire season and bring that back to the board next month. Hopefully, if their prediction is not favorable, they'll be like the rest of us who forecast things and not always correct. But as air quality specialists, we realize that air pollution doesn't abide by jurisdictional boundaries, that emissions from sources outside of our area may impact the air quality in another area, including our own. Later today, the U.S. Supreme Court will be reviewing EPA's Good Neighbor Rule, which aims to reduce pollution that blows into neighboring states, to evaluate the reasonableness of EPA's technical, scientific, and economic decisions related to that policy. This is one to watch. There are 3 states challenging the rule: West Virginia, Indiana, and Ohio, and other advocacy groups. And the Supreme Court has stayed implementation of the Good Neighbor Plan and taken the matter up before a lower court has even made a decision. Now, they'll hear the case today. My guess is that Vaughn will try to listen to some of that argument. And then we expect a decision on this sometime between June and October. But this could be a foundational ruling from this court. So moving on to other legislative matters, as we previously discussed here and at last night's West Jefferson County Community Task Force meeting, House Bill 136, which would extend KRS 224.1040, evidentiary privilege for environmental audit reports, exceptions, restrictions on civil penalties to the district, was amended in the House Energy and Natural Resources Committee to revise the definition of a pattern of violation to be more consistent with the definition used in US EPA's audit policy. Following that revision, which we agree with, the bill passed the House and was assigned to the Senate State and Local Government Committee on January the 26th. It has not yet been scheduled for consideration by the committee, but we will keep the board up to date as that legislation moves forward. Any questions about House Bill 136?
What is, anybody, I guess, what is the timing of legislation that moves through? When's the session over this year?
April 16th.
Okay. Are there last dates to move something through the Senate? Do you know? Anybody know?
No, already in Monday.
It's before, they try to time it so that there's enough time for the governor to veto
And then
and then
override.
override.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. On February 2nd, the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations announced a carbon capture pilot at Cane Run Generation Station. According to the Department of Energy, this pilot project led by PPL Corporation will deploy a carbon capture system at Louisville Gas and Electric's Cane Run Generating Station. natural gas combined cycle power plant. The carbon capture pilot at Cane Run Unit 7, we use an advanced heat integrated CO2 capture technology developed by the University of Kentucky. The project team plans to partner with an off-taker who will purify the captured CO2 for use as beverage-grade CO2. The goal of the project is to pilot the carbon capture technology and enable its replication at other natural gas combined cycle power plants. The project will expand existing training and internship programs to create a project workforce development plan that involves collaborating with local community leaders and organizations and partnering with local colleges and universities, including a local historically Black college and university, for implementation. Project team has extensive collective bargaining agreements with several labor unions, including the United Steelworkers. So congratulations to LG&E for securing a $72 million award and committing to more than $100 million for the project in its entirety. I said I'd say something nice. Later today, the district will have an opportunity to formally share our own good news about our recent government to government or G2G environmental justice grant with our partners, some dignitaries in the public. These grant opportunities, including LG&E's, and those of the climate pollution reduction grants that are being pursued by the Office of Sustainability, provide Louisville with a tremendous opportunity to demonstrate and build on and continue our progress in improving air quality. So it's really good news to be able to share, and I'm glad for your project and our own. Any questions about that? So it was kind of a quick discussion this morning, and I think you can see that even with that quick report, the district's work necessarily involves air quality, science, air pollution control technologies, legal, public health, and related policy issues, and environmental law. And of course, it's necessarily dynamic. Clean Air Act is a continuous improvement plan, and that's how we get those revised next and begin to continue to improve air quality while allowing robust economic development. Our air quality work here includes operating 5 sophisticated air monitoring stations, including the Commonwealth's N4 multi-pollutant air monitoring site, and several field-deployed gas chromatographs to monitor air toxics and photochemically reactive compounds, developing and implementing regulatory programs to reduce pollution in Louisville Metro and to meet those national ambient air quality standards while protecting public health and allowing for robust economic growth. We undertake permitting and assure compliance on some of the Commonwealth's largest and most complex stationary sources. Our staff investigate and respond to citizen concerns from exposure to open burning, dust, and odors. And we try to transparently share our work with the community and work collaboratively with stakeholders, including those community members, regulated sources, and our Louisville Metro peers to continue to improve air quality in Louisville. The Air Pollution Control Board and the decisions that you make are necessary for us to complete this work. So if there are no other questions on my report this morning, I'd like to give a brief presentation on the role of the board, which will be followed by a presentation on the district's work in 2020.
Can I ask one question?
Mhm.
On the purification of the CO2, does that happen on site? Or do you capture and then transport to a facility? You know what I mean?
CO2 is captured on site and then it's transported to a different facility for use.
And so is that local facilities? Don't know.
I'm not
Okay, I'm just curious.
I'm not involved in that piece.
Okay,
I'm not sure what's public.
okay, thank you.
Department of Energy is having a stakeholder group meeting this evening. Several of our staff will be attending that so that we can learn more about the project as well.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. I'm ready for the presentation. Andy, you can go ahead and start that presentation for me.
I am checking, Rachel. I actually don't have an email with a presentation.
Okay, right now. I just want to let folks know that today is the culmination of a myriad of different projects. And for myself and Ms. King, between now and 9 o'clock tonight, there is not a minute of our day that isn't busy, and several minutes of the day where we're triple parked with obligations. So forgive us if we're a little punchy. We do apologize.
Andy, that should be in your inbox now.
Thank you. Mm. No. Okay, I've got it running. Just one moment here.
From the evidence side.
It's gonna make them go up there.
Yes. They're all late. We're 2 years behind. Going to take us 2 years to catch up after this meeting.
Ah, goodness. All right, date notwithstanding. Andy, if you could please advance the next slide for me. So to start talking about the board, I am going to start talking about the district for just a moment. In 1952, when the General Assembly authorized any county in Kentucky that found itself so polluted to stand up an air pollution control district. We're the first and only, but we are established as a separate body, corporate and politic, and we are a subdivision of Commonwealth. So we are actually a state agency. It's the same for MSD. We're not metro government directly. We share relationship with metro government. For us, we are an administrative agency like MSD, but the difference is that local metro government provides us with administrative support. They are our Office of Management and Budget and our hiring partner. In the past, when we were initially started, our board hired, fired, and made sure that the bills were paid. With merger and before that, the city-county compact, those duties were shifted to the metro government. Our mission here is to protect air quality, and the board is central in that role. Next slide, please, Andy. As a regulatory agency, we are a creature of laws and rules. So because we are delegated the Federal Clean Air Act, we implement federal law. We must be at least as stringent as state law. So we have to cover the same that they also cover. But we have a significant difference in that we can be more stringent. So of course, KRS Chapter 77 is the law under which the board operates. The regulations are those that you pass, where you incorporate either the federal program or a new program, including things like our STAR program or even our more expanded risk management plan program. Our regulations are all available on our website. Hope you'll take a look at those. There's some notable things about those that are important. At the top, of course, is the title. It tells you the authority for the rule itself. And then at the bottom, you'll see revision dates. Generally speaking, our collected binder of regulatory provisions started in 1972. Next slide, please. Next, if you'll click, please. So a very unique feature of the Clean Air Act, which again is that marvelous continuous improvement plan, it requires US EPA to set a standard. And then it requires state and local air pollution control agencies to develop plans to meet those standards. We work under what's called cooperative federalism. And in my view, it's a very elegant design. It allows for EPA to evaluate the health-based standard, to reevaluate it, and then it lets those who know the sources in their jurisdiction to take the steps necessary to continue to improve air quality. I've worked in other environmental areas. Nowhere else do state and local entities stand on equal footing. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, KRS Chapter 77 is our authorizing statute. Our regulations must be at least as stringent as the state's regulations. In 119 counties, the Kentucky Division for Air Quality regulates air pollution. Their laws are limited and their regulations are limited to being no more stringent than federal law. We have to be at least as stringent as their programs, but we can be more. And again, STAR, the risk management plan program that we expanded, are really good examples.
Were those required to be approved by the state legislature?
No,
Okay.
you, the board, are
That's
the
allowed.
approving authority. Now, anytime that we have a final decision of either the board or the district, those decisions can be appealed. So there's a judge can actually weigh in later, but the General Assembly has given this board the authority to make the air pollution control regulations that regulate sources here in Jefferson County. Next slide. Next slide. So, as our board members know, you are the regulatory authority for the air pollution control district, and you are private citizens who are appointed by the mayor and approved by Metro Council. The regulation that was adopted in 1952 requires that we have political party parity on our board. So no more than 4 of our 7 board members can be of any political party. Metro Council, in the recent past few years, has also passed some additional requirements for boards, and that is that they reflect both racial and gender, and then geographical parity as much as possible. Next slide, please. One of your primary roles is to adopt regulations, orders, and resolutions as needed to control air pollution. Your charge under KRS Chapter 77 is to adopt reasonable regulations. I'm making air quotes for those who can't see it around reasonable. That is the word in our statute. To control air pollution by weight or measure. With respect to our work, you can find our regulations online. We go through a very public process. We'll talk about that here at the end. But our regulations are available publicly, and then the board's actions, orders, and agreements for several years going back are also available on our website. And it includes enforcement board agreements that are over $5,000, enforceable board agreements, and those are ones where there's no violation involved, but we need a way to capture and make accountable a provision or action by a company that is not due to a violation.
Do you have an example?
LG&E operates their Mill Creeks Unit 1 and 2 according to an enforceable board agreement in the summertime to reduce the amount of NOx that may be produced. And then, of course, there are board orders like the recent NOx rack plan that we completed for LG&E's Mill Creek natural gas combined cycle turbine. Next slide, please. Of course, the board is a public entity, and I congratulate you all on keeping and maintaining an opportunity for the public to come speak to you every month that you meet. You're a very unique board in that you have a standing opportunity for the public to comment. on any air pollution concern, not just one that we're currently considering, such as a new regulation or an agreed board order. With respect to public hearings, you're required to hold a public hearing before you take action on an agreed board order or a regulation. The district is a separate entity. The district, not the board, issues permits. So there are specific requirements for the district to hold public hearings, but our rules require that we have a board member there to host that public meeting and public hearing, pardon me. Several of you have participated in those public hearings, and I very much appreciate your willingness to accommodate us and the public, particularly when we hold those public hearings in the evenings. Next slide, please. Slide really lays out our regulatory development process in detail. And one of the first steps that happens is that we identify regulations that need to be developed or revised. For example, we're currently going to need to revise our Title V rule to address affirmative defenses. We'll be doing that work sometime in the probably next couple of months. Once we have that, we have a work group formed to look at what we need to revise, do a little bit of scoping, do some internal drafting and an internal review. We take it out for informal public review and comment. Not taking any action, we're not bringing it to the board yet, but we want to hear from folks about what we're proposing. Then we bring it to one of the two board committees that consider our regulations. With their approval, we bring it out to the public for formal comment and review. Following that, the board takes action. Some of our rules, in fact, most of them, have another step that goes beyond that, and that is to be incorporated into our state implementation plan. So we send them off to the cabinet. They get reviewed for concurrent jurisdiction. They get reviewed by US EPA, and at US EPA, they go through another public process to be included into our state implementation plan. Next slide, please, Andy. Go back one slide, please, Andy. I'm going to just hit on something here before I forget. What you see is the little symbol there is actually a person at a podium. Kind of looks like fire hydrants back here. Just a little stunned by it for a minute. But those are places where the public can weigh in and talk to the board. They can talk to the district. Some of it is informal and some of it is formal. When we have formal notice and comment for both our rulemaking and for our permits, we're required to provide a written response to comment document. We've adopted that practice with respect to our enforcement agreed board orders as well. And so again, I hope that the public will take the opportunity to engage with us and with the board in these opportunities where they're available. And there are several places where they can engage. So, any questions about the board's role? Hearing none. Next slide, please, Andy. So that brings us to what the board does and then what the district does. Of course, we collect information, administer rules, issue permits, enforce permits and board orders. We educate and assist regulated sources and the public. We do policy development. Your willingness to participate on this board is what helps us get the work done. So we are very thankful for your participation and your dedication to air quality in Louisville. With that, I'd like for my colleagues to join me. We'll go into our annual report of the district's work. Andy, do you have the presentation for?
I do not. This is the only presentation I've had so far.
Andy, we can't hear you hardly.
I do not. This was the only presentation I've gotten so far.
I sent it,
Look for, from Matt Mudd.
Okay. Let's see, inbox.
This is the annual report for 2023.
It is the annual report for 2023.
Is it online or will it be online soon?
It is online.
There's a link in your board email. Go to it directly.
Okay. Just a second here. I'll have that queued up for us.
We also sent this out to our entire email list, so if folks listening are on our email list, they would have received that as well. But it is posted to the Air Pollution Control District website. We'll drop a link in the chat.
And if you could go forward a couple of slides. Good morning to the board, and good morning to everyone else. Thank you for being here. So first, I'm going to start by providing a brief overview of the air quality update that's in our annual report. This obviously isn't a comprehensive update of air quality in Louisville, but it is some of the primary stats, tools, standards, and other things that help us monitor our air quality progress. So, Andy, if you go on to the next slide. So first, the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, which Rachel has already talked a little bit about today. I know many of you are familiar, but briefly, these are standards set by EPA for 6 common pollutants called criteria pollutants. That's carbon monoxide, lead, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, particle pollution, and ozone. Using air monitoring data that's collected through our air monitoring network, a design value for each pollutant for the area is created, and then that design value is compared to the standard for that pollutant. As you can see on the visual up there on the presentation, at the end of 2023, the Louisville area meets the standard for 5 of these 6 pollutants, excluding ozone. Next slide, please. So it's not uncommon when you compare us to other metropolitan areas for ground level ozone to be a pervasive air pollutant, a common air pollutant. So that is the trend line for ozone compared to recent national ambient air quality standards, which are routinely updated or reviewed.
What's the first date on there?
The first date on there is 1997. So we have on that is 1997 through 2023. That's year-to-year design values compared to standards. So as you can see, we have seen a decrease in concentrations of the ozone over time, and our design value has gone down. As recently as 2021 and 2022, I know it's a little bit tough to see from here, but our area did meet that standard for ozone. And at the end of 2022, using that data, we applied for redesignation to be attaining the standard. But while that decision was pending from EPA, last year in 2023, we experienced an uptick in those exceedance days of ozone. That was primarily during the summer, during those high PM and ozone days that happened due to that during the periods of the Canadian wildfire smoke. So as a result of that uptick in exceedance days, the preliminary design value after 2023 has now taken us back out of that attainment. So that happened while that decision on attainment was pending. So the next slide, so the next slide, that's ozone, the basic overview of ozone. Is fine particle pollution. As you saw on the initial slide, we are meeting as of the end of 2023, our design value is meeting that standard. This graphic up here is on a similar timeline, year-to-year design values compared to the standards. This started in 1999 and it's now to 2023. So we are meeting that standard. As Rachel mentioned earlier, US EPA on February 7th, 2024 announced that they were strengthening that fine particle standard from 12 micrograms per cubic meter to 9 micrograms per cubic meter. So while our current design, that's signified by that red line on that graphic. While our current design value does not meet that new standard, our particle pollution levels are expected to continue that downward trend that goes down, even with that slight uptick in the past couple of years. And we are expected to ultimately meet that standard in the year to come. With their proposal, a graphic included in their proposal, it was predicted that we meet that standard by 2032, which is a later deadline. The announcement of that new standard is just the first part of a thorough and prescriptive process. So the initial designation occurs 2 years after the rule is finalized, and then the area will have until 2032 to demonstrate that it's meeting the standard before any additional and more stringent steps to bring the area into attainment may be required. So that's kind of while we're meeting the particle pollution standard now, there's going to be a lot more to come with the new standard going forward. So that's an overview on the NAAQS, the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. If you go on the next slide, please. So another tool that we use to report and talk about air quality is the Air Quality Index. It's a tool created by US EPA. I know that many are familiar with it. It is a series of values ranked on a scale from 1 to 500. Those values are then sorted into categories ranging from good to hazardous. So in total, we had 187 good days in 2023, 157 moderate days, 20 days that were unhealthy for sensitive groups, and 1 unhealthy day. As you can see up there, nearly all, if not all of them, the elevated days, the unhealthy for sensitive groups, and the 1 unhealthy day are during the summer months. This is common, because factors like heat and sun are important in producing ozone, which is kind of our most common pollutant that creates those unhealthy for sensitive groups or unhealthy days. But like I mentioned before, the trend this summer was exacerbated, especially compared to previous, the most recent years, both due to the presence of Canadian wildfire smoke and an increase in those hot, dry summer days that help produce ozone. So you can definitely see that trend line in the middle specs quite a bit up. If you go on to the next slide, a little bit more on those wildfire smoke impacts. So in June and July, Louisville experienced 16 days that were unhealthy for sensitive groups and 1 that was unhealthy. That's out of the total 20 days that were unhealthy for sensitive groups this last year. And so that's, those days were due to both PM 2.5, which is the main issue with wildfire smoke, and ozone. That's compared to 6 of those days in the same period in 2020. I meant to say 2022 there. So when you compare 6 to 16, those wildfire smoke days had a pretty significant impact on our air quality. That unhealthy day as well was our first since 2018. So it caused a bit of an uptick and kind of an outlier year compared to recent ones in 2023. Go on to the next slide, please. So this is, to put it in a little bit of context, I know these visuals are a little bit far away when they're on the screen in here, but this is our annual daily AQI values, categorized by year since 2000. This is from the AQI dashboard on our website. So it allows you to see that even though there is some variance year to year, you can see it's not always a consistent trend, but the long-term trend is pretty clear. That we've seen a pretty big improvement in AQI values in the last 20 years. Even this last year, which you see, there's a bit of an uptick in those orange days. You can see that it's still a significant improvement on, especially see the early 2000s. We saw a significant amount more of those unhealthy for sensitive groups and unhealthy days back then. So that's with the outside impact from wildfire smoke. So on to the next slide. Both the NAAQS and the AQI are kind of use what's measured in our air from our air monitoring network. So this is a little bit about local emissions, what's being put into the air locally. So estimated local emissions of common pollutants, those criteria pollutants like fine particle pollution, sulfur dioxide, and the pollutants that form ozone have decreased in the last few decades, some significantly. You can see on the top right that those are the basic trend lines for some of those more common pollutants. And then also, since the APCD's STAR program was passed in 2005, local emissions of toxic air pollution from industrial sources have dropped almost 80%, and emissions of STAR's highest priority compounds have dropped about 96% or nearly 96%. So that toxic air pollution, as opposed to those common air pollutants, that's air toxics. And so that's broadly considered anything that is not one of those few criteria pollutants, but is largely considered to impact human health at certain levels. So that's everything else that isn't a criteria. Those have gone down as well. Next slide, please. So APCD currently monitors for select air toxics at 2 sites in Louisville using equipment called an Auto GC. This is really sophisticated equipment, and our air monitoring team were among the first in the country to utilize this equipment for this use. In early 2023, we released a report covering the first year of air quality data that was fully quality assured from that equipment. That was collected in July of 2020 to June of 2021. That graphic that you see up there on the right is just one of the visuals. It's an example of one of the visuals in that report. If you're interested in learning more about it, I would really recommend going to the full report, which is linked both in this presentation and in our annual report. It has a lot of the context and comparable data and information that helps you understand that data. It's a bit complex, but we tried to make it provide all the data and information that'll help understand it in there. But largely the finding of these new monitors are similar, shows something similar to our emission estimates and our emissions calculations, that there have been significant reductions in the health risk produced by toxic air pollution since the passage of STAR back in 2005. So the last thing on the air quality update, if you go to the next slide, is a bit on odors. As many of you know, APCD regulates odors through District Regulation 113. Odor-related responsibilities of the APCD include investigating reports of odors by residents and addressing odor violations through compliance and enforcement work. The resident reports that we receive are really the best way, or among the best ways we have to track those odors and show people where those odors are happening. APCD received over 4,200 reports of odors in 2023, and that's compared to 1,800 in 2022 and 648 in 2021. So we've seen a large uptick in those resident reports of odors. Based on previous presentations that I've made before this board, this might not be completely news to you, but it's those numbers, when you put them up there, there's a pretty clear difference. So the significant increase in odors, obviously odors come from a variety of sources in Louisville, but the significant increase is due to reports of odors from the city's combined sewer system and the connected treatment facilities. The odor from these sources is often described in reports with terms like sewer, rotten egg, and other similar verbiage. Similar to a trend seen to a lesser degree in 2022 and a little bit in 2021, drought conditions in late summer and early fall and into the rest of fall. Easy to see on that timeline there, that's odor reports by month in 2023. That exacerbated existing issues with the city's combined sewer system and led to odors that prompted an unprecedented surge of resident odor reports. So that is the air quality update. Now for the section to section overview, I'll pass it on to Bill.
Okay, next slide, please, Andy. Hello, board members. I'm Billy DeWitt, Air Monitoring Program Manager. Just a few slides about some of the incredible work that small but remarkable group of scientists performed over a year's time. That's one of our all-stars in our filter prep room right there on that picture, Starlet Raj, as she's getting some particulate filters ready. Next slide. So there's a lot of numbers on this slide, but we just wanted to give you kind of an idea of the quality and the quantity of data that these folks look at every year. There's 385,000 approximately hourly data points that were analyzed for legal defensibility, and 50 million 1-minute data points that are used to support that hourly data. Staff performed and evaluated about 5,000 tests and checks on air monitoring instrumentation, including about 750 rigorous checks, along with the automatic 4,300 nightly checks. We collected approximately 430,000 hourly data points for VOCs. The above number was for criteria pollutants. Performed another 3,500 tests and checks on those instrumentation with about 30,000 data points associated with those checks. And through all that, we produced approximately 1,250 reports and documents to demonstrate the legal defensibility of the data that we produce. Next slide, please, Andy. Some of the team highlights, just a very high-level overview. We installed and began the air sensor co-location shelter program where citizens or anybody really that have lower cost air quality sensors can co-locate their sensors with our regulatory methods and get a good data comparison. We provide that data to them for comparison. We implemented ozone monitoring at Algonquin Parkway Air Monitoring Site and revamped the network to improve accuracy and representativeness of quality control checks under high humidity conditions. We upgraded the continuous fine particles monitoring network to improve the accuracy of PM 2.5 measurements and implemented capabilities for evaluating air toxic VOCs at the Cannons Lane site compared with the Algonquin Parkway monitoring site that predominantly measures VOCs and air toxics. But we'd like to get a sample comparison to see the difference in the location of the county. I think with that, I'll pass it on to the next segment.
Next slide.
Hello, I'm Matt King. I'm the manager of the permitting section here at APCD. Next slide, please. So permits are just one piece of the Clean Air Act, but it's a really important piece. And we've got a really good team here to put these permits together. In 2023, we issued 22 construction permits. Those are sometimes for brand new construction of facilities or pieces of facilities, but a lot of times it's for companies that are making changes to how they operate those facilities. That's a really important time to make sure you get all of the applicable regulations into a permit. Oftentimes is what the neighbors are most interested in. But we also did 11 of our larger permit renewals. That again is for our Title V and what we call FEDU operating permits. That's really an important time. They don't establish new limits unless a new regulation is passed. But they do offer an opportunity to really get in there and apply appropriate monitoring, update testing requirements, things like that. Really important as well. And then a slew of other smaller permits. Something the permit section's been working on for several years now is trying to increase the public availability of these documents. It's a really tricky part of the Clean Air Act. So we're trying to offer opportunities for folks to learn more about what a permit is, what's the basis of these permits, and then hold some public meetings, which are meant to be a more informal process. Allow folks to come in and ask questions, give them answers that day, unlike our public hearings where we're just taking comment. We've seen a really significant increase in the number of folks participating, the number of comments we're receiving. It's still a really tricky game. I don't think we've fully hit the mark yet, but we are seeing results from our efforts. And we really appreciate people taking the time to review these permits, trying to help us make them better. But we do acknowledge it's a frustrating process. It's a really inside game. It's a tough one to understand. But I really think we're seeing that improvement and we're hoping to build upon that this year. Next slide, please. Another big responsibility of the permitting section is to do our stationary source emission inventory. We also do a area source inventory, which is more of an estimate of those more common but harder to track activities, smaller businesses, house painting, grilling, a lot of those kind of things. And then we do a mobile source inventory as well for the transportation sector. But the stationary source inventory is something we've put a lot of work into the last few years. We are using a system known as the State and Local Emission Inventory System, SLICE. That's really eliminated a lot of the data entry the district had done. And it also speeds up the transfer of that data to EPA. So that's really allowed us to look closer at those emission sources, double check those calculations, and improve the accuracy of those emission estimates. Both Karen Thorne and Chris Gerstle with the permit section have done a lot of work to improve that. But really, the entire team helps, and so do the compliance engineers as well, to review that data. EPA has proposed some changes to the national emission inventory. Some of that stuff the district has already been doing. So they have been historically on a 3-year inventory. They're transferring to an annual inventory, but the district has been doing annual inventories for years. Hazardous air pollutants were optional, but the district had been reporting those also for years. But these new changes also require reporting by smaller sources of HAPs. That's going to be different thresholds for the different pollutants based on their harmfulness. So we're preparing to really assist those smaller businesses that may not be as aware of this and how to do this. And that's something that the team has really done well in other aspects of permitting and environmental regulations. So we hope to be able to help folks do that. This SLICE system will really help us to be prepared for those changes. It will be a better inventory, but it will provide some challenges. So I think the team is more than up to them, and we've got this inventory into a really good spot. So I think we're poised for success on that. Thank you.
Next slide. I'm Steve Gravett, Compliance Enforcement Manager. Next slide, So my big highlight for 2023 was teamwork. Starting in the spring, we had 2 employees leave our section for other career opportunities. And then over the summer, we had 3 other full career employees retire. So our community compliance section effectively had no compliance officers. And as Matt mentioned earlier, we had more complaints than we've ever had in the past. So we had a all hands on deck. We had permit staff involved. The industrial compliance team was involved. Supervisors and managers were involved with handling the phone line, responding to complaints, following up with people that were complaining, following up with companies that we found to have odor issues or dust issues, lots of open burn complaints. And in the meantime, when we were handling those complaints, we were trying to fill those compliance officers' position. That was a trying endeavor last summer. So at this point, we filled all of those. They are training up. I think the first one came off of her probationary period this week. So we're happy to have a full staff again. I thank everyone in the district in permitting, program planning, other parts of compliance, everybody that pitched in to help out with that workload. Next slide, Andy. While they were doing that, they were also doing their regular full-time jobs. We handled our full compliance evaluations for Title V's. It's every other year. For synthetic minors, we call them FEDUs here. It's every 5 years. So we did 26 full compliance evaluations last year. That involves an on-site inspection and an evaluation of all of the previous year's reports. We inspected 6 R&P facilities with emergency management. We issued gas station permits and performed inspections, asbestos permits, and reviewed wrecking permits, performed those inspections. Our small business compliance assistants, off the coordinator, handled 132 assistance requests, and so many odor service requests last year. We issued 8 notices of violations, $150,000 worth of penalties. That's all from me. Next slide, Amy.
Okay, well, so the program planning section, this past year, next slide, Andy. Although I love that picture, so a little longer. This past year, the program planning team continued building on a strong foundation of existing programs and outreach and engagement strategies. This team's work is varied and dynamic, so we'll just have a few highlights today, but some of those include efforts to increase the accessibility of APCD's information and add transparency to our work. So we continue to build new online resources for accessing data, reports, and information to support those public comment opportunities that Matt talked about earlier. These efforts are amplified through our social media channels, which continue to grow this past year. And we continue to offer our Clearing the Air workshops in partnership with our colleagues from across the district. covered new topics like air sensors, as well as repeating some of our popular standards. And our programs continue to support community partners. We awarded our third Lawn Care for Cleaner Air Community Equipment Grant to Youthville. And we're looking forward to announcing our 2024 selection next month after receiving a record number of applications, which really shows that that grant program is filling a community need. We also sponsored the Louisville Sustainability Council and partnered with them to hold an air quality trivia night as part of their Green Drink series. It was a lot of fun, I think, for district staff and for the attendees as well. And we continued our longstanding partnership with the West Jefferson County Community Task Force, which included recruitment of community members to test an EPA-developed odor reporting app and air sample collection system. And through it all, we continued our strong outreach presence for the district and for our outreach programs. So from large events like Waterfront Wednesdays, Party for the Planet at the Zoo, Mayor's Night Out, and many other of those type events, to small group meetings and classrooms even, the program planning team, along with our other APCD team colleagues, got our work and air quality information out into the community this past year. Going forward, all of those program planning team strengths will come into play as we support the Rubbertown Air Toxics and Health Action Grant activities of the district and of our community partners in that project. Next slide, please, Andy. I'm going to bring us home with our final section here, the administration team. Next slide. Although we do love to see Hunter. Those that didn't hear the update on Hunter, Hunter has gone on from supporting our admin team to supporting a veteran in her new role as that veteran service dog. So we're really happy about that one too. But this was a year of transition, not just for Hunter, but also the administration team, who really provided the backbone of support to APCD as we traverse through many different changes. With retirements and employee changes, we onboarded 4 new employees in 2023 and began the process for more hires that have already joined the team so far this year in 2024. Workday was a big change in 2023, and it marked the first full operating year with that HR and finance system. This team, the administration team, and Monica Little in particular, really helped us get through that change and normalize those new operations. More change came at the end of 2023 with a new timekeeping system, UKG, that has also affected all of Metro. And I'm proud to say that APCD really made that switch rather smoothly, and it's now in a new normal for that function as well. But it was a big change for everyone. And again, to thank our admin coordinator, Monica Little, for helping us all through that. It brought a lot of changes to her work as well. And then our website, well, keeping in the theme of change, one constant about our website is change. It is a dynamic resource, but this past year, it was revised to a completely new platform along with the rest of Metro. This team, in conjunction with Matt Mudd, also our communications coordinator, really made that seamless transition and maintained availability of all of our information for the public throughout it. So just to kind of give you an idea of the daily work of the team, here's a few of the numbers. So this team scanned and uploaded more than 1,700 documents to our document management system. That supports the work of all of our permitting and compliance team members as well. We responded to 109 open records requests. Those responses were timely and thorough. We take great pride in our ability to provide the community with their records on request. We processed 452 lawn care for cleaner air rebates. That's a really popular program that's been a favorite in our community for decades now, and that really depends on that processing, and that's a pretty big workload that happens behind the scenes. So we're really appreciative of the administrative team that supports us. And looking forward to 2024, we're really excited about adding a new team leader for this group. We're hiring a new executive administrator. So Carlette Jones will join us in March, and we really can't be more excited to have her at the helm of this really high-functioning and successful team. So with that, I'll hand it back to Rachel to bring some. Thank you very much.
So we've talked about the district today in our various components. But from where I sit, what I see is a whole. Our air monitoring gives us information that we use to develop new regulations and policies with your help. Those regulations and policies are expressed in our permits. Our industrial compliance engineers and compliance officers go out to assure compliance. And again, with your help, we take enforcement where necessary. And through it all, we continue to monitor the air, and that drives our work forward. The district in their day-to-day roles been introduced to you. There are specialized roles that assist the board, and that includes by statute, an air pollution control officer. This position requires a professional licensed Kentucky engineer. We've split that air pollution control officer role into two to assist the board. Matt King serves as the technical permitting air pollution control officer, and Steve Gravett serves as the air pollution control officer for compliance and enforcement. Together, separate, they share responsibilities because permitting plus compliance plus enforcement is what equals clean air. They're here to assist the board with technical questions. Similarly, by statute, we're required to provide the board with the secretary treasurer to help run the meeting smoothly. Of course, and we apologize for the noise today too. That was a little unexpected. But the board is also assisted in their work, as is the district, by the dedicated services of the Jefferson County Attorney's Office. Quan Wen is filling that role for us today. And so we're here to support the board as they continue their work. And again, without you, our work couldn't continue. Are there any questions?
Any questions from the board?
No.
I got a couple, actually.
Okay.
On the first part, Matt, the trend, it seems like on almost all the pollutants is down, improving. The exception, there's a few, but the odor and the dust seems to be going in the other direction. And I realize that's partly weather related. Is it also because it's easier for the public to now respond?
So we think that that is part of it. We've seen an uptick in the use of apps, for example. The Smell My City app certainly does make it easier for folks to report those odors. But we're not exactly sure if it's sort of a chicken and egg dynamic. Are we receiving more reports because it's just easier and those odors were always there? Or has this changed people's perception of nuisance issues within their community? So
Combination.
we will say that, with respect to our own staff, we receive the reports and then we investigate. So we do have the ability to look at our own data observations with respect to have the odors increased, for example, or is there more dust happening, which will help us as we look forward to implementing this new National Ambient Air Quality Standard.
Okay, and then this kind of dovetails a little bit on, Billy, on this, the instruments are out in the public that's running the sensors and the like. Are you seeing more involvement from those folks, and is it working well, I guess?
It's pollutant based on those sensors, really. There's some that are really good for particulate matter, for instance, are pretty good sensors. The gas has not come along as well, but there are several groups of citizen groups that are doing studies with sensors, are interested in performing studies with sensors and using them in their neighborhood. And we have a good amount of documentation on, kind of the best way to do those things. And the EPA also has a handbook guide. And so we try to help folks use them in the proper way. I think, the clearing air workshops is online that really goes through that in detail. Tom Law gave a nice presentation on that. And, so we've seen an uptick in interest. We expect that to continue and we're still working on developing our own sensor lending library that we've got a grant from EPA on that.
Great.
We have some in-house that we can let folks borrow.
Thank you. You're welcome. Matt, I got a question for you too. Do you keep metrics on the number of folks that actually access to review permits online?
I'm not sure about actually accessing them, but we track the comments that come in and the
Okay.
attendance of the meeting.
And is that increasing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the last question I had was, so it sounds like we're pretty much back to full strength on an employment level.
Well, we have some key vacancies. The regulatory coordinator position is the next key vacancy that Ms. King and I are really looking forward to have filled. That fills a big,
And that's projected for the next several months.
It's been posted right now. I think it's open for another week, for a full 3-week posting period, and then it will be.
You get a chance to look at the applicants before it closes? Okay.
we don't. But I will say, with our recent hiring of an executive administrator, we had more than 74 applicants
Okay.
apply for that position. So we look forward to a wide variety of folks applying for this regulatory coordinator position. It's a jack of all trades position within the district. In the past, we've seen some amazing candidates come through. We look forward to filling that. We do have some upcoming additional retirements. I am sad to say that from July 1 of last year to June 30th of this year, we will have had 8 of our 57 APCD employees with more than 28 years experience retired. So that loss of institutional knowledge is a little painful.
Amen. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Not for me. Anybody else? Okay, thank you so much. So, yes, sure.
You asked a question about, the smelling, the smell and using, and I think what's important to understand is before that the community felt like they had no way to do anything about it. So once the smell my city came into practice, I think people just became empowered and began to use it. So I think that's the real reason for it. Not that the smells weren't always there,
Mhm.
but that they didn't have a way to be a part of trying to get something.
Thank you. So moving on, we're going to finish with the air quality report, toxics report, the other reports that were distributed. Is there any comment or question on any of those reports? The board. Hearing none. Want to kind of remind board members to make sure they respond to meeting notices, so we have a sense if we're going to have a quorum at meetings. So please pay attention to email invites that you get. That'd be great. Thank you. With that, I'll now join the regular meeting of the